Diversity and Inclusion in Education Bill 2024. We ask Almighty God that you open our hearts to accept those things that are true and to demonstrate love always so that we and all citizens of this federation can live in peace and harmony. All which we seek in thy name and for the sake of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Motion for the order paper as circulated. Everyone, please be seated.
I recognize Honorable Member, Minister of Youth.
Madam President, I seek leave for the approval of the order paper as circulated.
I recognize Member, Minister of Social Development.
Madam President, I rise to seek leave to second that motion.
The question is that the motion for the approval of the order paper as circulated be approved. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
Messages from the Deputy Governor General.
There are no messages from the Deputy Governor General.
Announcements by the President.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for joining us today for this mock sitting of this Honorable House. Whether in person or virtually, your presence is greatly appreciated. I would also like to take this opportunity to congratulate my fellow youth parliamentarians who have recently received their CSEC and CAPE examination results. Your achievements are commendable and deserving of recognition. As President of the Nevis Youth Parliament and as a young person witnessing the ongoing crime crisis, I want to express my deepest condolences to all affected by the recent violence, especially to the loved ones of those who have lost their lives. It is clear that we face a profound and complex issue. Although there is no simple answer or immediate remedy to this crisis, we must respond with a collective societal effort. Only by coming together as a nation, we can build a safer and more secure federation. For today's mock sitting, we have with us a panel of 3 distinguished judges to assist in evaluating the presentations. I will now read the profiles of these judges. Mr. Kyle Alex Weeks. Mr. Kyle Alex Weeks is a certified IT professional with over 20 years' experience in the information technology field. He has been employed with the Bank of Nevis Limited since July 2016 as manager, Technology Solutions. Prior to taking up employment with the Bank of Nevis Limited, Mr. Weeks was employed as Senior Information Systems Officer with the Nevis Electricity Company Limited. Mr. Weeks has an affinity towards the life of leadership and community service. He serves as Chairman of Hope Nevis Incorporated, sits on the board of the Maud Cross Preparatory School, and serves as Deacon and President of the Brotherhood Department of the Ebenezer United Church. Mr. Weeks is the proud sponsor of the annual Kyle Alex Weeks Oratory Challenge at the Joyson Library Primary School for the past 4 years. Mr. J. Mario Phillip. Mr. J. Mario Phillip is a graduate of the Charleston Secondary School and Nevis Sixth Form College, where he served as an executive member and debater of the Nevis Literary and Debating Society. Mr. Phillip began his life of civic engagement by serving in roles such as Public Relations Officer of the Nevis Youth Council 2013 to 2014 and alternate in the St. Kitts Nevis CARICOM Youth Ambassador 2013 to 2015. His love for nation building led him to volunteer as a staff sponsor of the Nevis Island Assembly Youth Parliament during his 2-year stint as a teacher at Charleston Secondary School from 2015 to 2017. Mr. Phillip currently works as a gender officer at Department of Gender Affairs and remains active in community engagement as a member of the HOPE, Helping Our People Excel Nevis Incorporated, the founder and chairman of the Nevis Boys Mentorship Program, and a volunteer protocol officer with the Premier's Ministry. Mr. Phillip is a recent alum of the U.S. Department of State's International Visitor Leadership Program, engaging youth in the political process. where he had the privilege of participating in debating challenges among congressional sittings with the Seattle, Washington YMCA Youth Government Initiatives in summer 2024. Shamika Maloney. Ms. Shamika Maloney is a national of the Twin Island Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis. She is an accomplished attorney at law, a trained legislative drafter, and a notary public. She was called to the bar of the Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court, St. Christopher and Nevis Circuit in November of 2007. Ms. Maloney is the owner and manager of Maloney & Co. Attorneys at Law, a small law firm located at Cedar Trees, Charlestown, Nevis, where she provides legal and consultancy services. With a distinguished background in public service, Ms. Maloney previously served as a senior legal counsel, registrar of local companies, as well as clerk of the Nevis Island Assembly. She is a member of the St. Kitts and Nevis Bar Association and is a past member of the Bar Council and Disciplinary Committee. Ms. Maloney is also a board member of several institutions in Nevis. She is a member of the Methodist Church on Nevis. When Ms. Maloney is not working, she devotes her time to her interests, which include events planning, culinary arts, counseling, and volunteer work. I would also like to, at this time, ask everyone to turn off their devices or put them on vibrate or silent so we do not have any interruption during this mock sitting of this honorable house. Thank you.
Statements by ministers, personal explanation, introduction of bill, and first reading.
I recognize Honorable Member, Premier and Minister of Education.
Madam President, I seek leave to introduce and have read a first time a bill shortly entitled the Nevis Diversity and Inclusion in Education Bill of 2024.
I recognize Honorable Member, Minister of Youth.
Madam President, I rise to second that motion and reserve my right to speak on the bill shortly entitled Nevis Diversity and Inclusion in Education Bill 2024, later in the debate.
The question is that the bill shortly entitled Nevis Diversity and Inclusion in Education Bill 2024 be read a first time. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
A bill to promote diversity, equity, and inclusion in educational institutions to foster a more inclusive and equitable learning environment for all students and for related or incidental matters.
Nevis Diversity and Inclusion in Education Bill 2024 has been read a first time.
Public business, bill second and third readings.
I recognize Honorable Member, Premier and Minister of Education.
Madam President, I rise to move the second reading of the bill shortly entitled Nevis Diversity and Inclusion in Education Bill of 2024.
I recognize Honorable Member, Minister of Social Development.
Madam President, I rise to second that motion.
I recognize Honorable Member, Premier and Minister of Education.
Madam President, I rise to begin the debate on the bill shortly entitled Nevis Diversity and Inclusion in Education Bill of 2024. Madam President, my fellow members of Cabinet, members bench opposing, members of the gallery, a pleasant good morning. I stand today as Premier and Minister of Education, proud to present the Nevis Diversity and Inclusion in Education Bill of 2024 to this Assembly. Madam President, the intention behind this bill is understanding diversity, accepting diversity, and creating change, regardless of one's race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, religion, socioeconomic status, or ability. We are all Nevisians, and as such, we must all be treated equally. My government is one that embraces change. We believe that change is necessary within our educational institutions, and as such, we believe in being proactive to accomplish it. Madam President, this bill allows for both teachers and students to become educated on diversity and to become inclusive with those who are deemed different. The bill outlines in Section 3B the steps towards achievement, as training and professional development for faculty and staff will be implemented. It is through these programs that cultural competencies, diversity awareness, and inclusive teaching practices will be taught. Through these programs, teachers will gain the skills required to properly assist and protect their students. No longer will there be incidences of insensitivity or biases towards students or staff due to these differences. Educational institutions will become a safe space for all. Furthermore, Madam President, to ensure this safe space, in Section 3C of the bill, mechanisms for both students and staff to report any incidences of discrimination, harassment, or biases on these aforementioned characteristics will be implemented. Mechanisms such as anonymous online reporting forums, emails, and incident reporting boxes will be used to ensure accountability. We support accountability, and as such, the bill in Section 5A ensures that educational institutions report annually their genuine efforts to promote diversity and inclusion through data on student demographics, faculty and staff composition, and incidents of discrimination or bias. This will allow for accountability to be ensured against perpetrators of bias and for protection for their victims. No longer will it be accepted for a member of staff to be treated differently and excluded due to their sexual orientation, nor will it be accepted for a student to be bullied during break time due to their socioeconomic status. Currently, our government allows for religious freedom as students who may be of a different religion to that of Christianity or of no religion at all are excused from morning devotions and prayers. This is a precedent that we would like to continue, as we do not believe in forcing conformity, nor do we believe in punishing those for not conforming and for being different. Our nation is one that is diverse and must be treated with the sensitivity that being diverse requires. Madam President, this bill not only ensures that people within the educational institutions are diverse and inclusive, but also ensures that the curriculum is as well, the true meat of the matter. We, as a people, know the feeling of having our history ignored under British rule. It was a time where we forcefully assimilated to the Europeans and almost forgot ourselves. Now that we are independent, we must not follow our colonizers' footsteps and ignore the history of our fellow Nevisians. Currently, our educational institutions see very low levels of history students, some classes with as little as 4 students. These numbers can be explained for many reasons, but one of which is exclusivity. The syllabus shows a high focus on Black Caribbean history, in contrast to, for example, Asian Caribbean history. The bill outlines in Section 4A that the curriculum shall incorporate diverse perspectives and histories, such as those of the indigenous, Indian, and Asian communities. These groups are all equally Nevisian, and they deserve to have their histories taught and heard adequately, thus providing a comprehensive and quality education for all. Madam President, not only must the education be of a high quality, but the access to that quality education must also be inclusive. This bill in Section 4B ensures that, quote, educational institutions provide resources and support services to students from underrepresented or marginalized communities to ensure their success, end quote. Madam President, whether it is school supplies, lunch, or school uniforms, educational institutions will be provided with the resources to ensure that students can maximize their knowledge gains efficiently. No longer will students be forced to sacrifice their education due to their financial situation. They will all have an equal opportunity to access quality education. Madam President, our students are our nation's future. Our teachers educate our future. My government firmly believes that everyone deserves to be represented and included, regardless of mere characteristics, but simply because they are Nevisian. That is their right. This bill will benefit not just students and teachers, but also our nation as a whole. as our sensitivity to diversity and ensuring inclusion would govern our interactions with one another and subsequently the world around us. As we interact with tourists from all walks of life, or we engage in diplomacy where we represent our island, our reputation will benefit, as the world will know that Nevis is diverse and is inclusive of that diversity. Madam President, every citizen, regardless of race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, socioeconomic status, religion.
Honourable member, your time is up.
Madam President, may I be given 30 seconds to finish?
The question is that the honourable member be given extra time. Those in favour? Those against? The ayes have it.
Thank you. Madam President, every citizen, regardless of race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, socioeconomic background, religion, or ability deserve protection and care whilst being educated. They deserve to feel safe whilst receiving their human right to education. There is no one look to being division, and as such, everyone deserves to be included equally and to have that inclusion protected by law. Thus, as Premier and Minister of Education, I wish this bill, the Nevis Diversity and Inclusion in Education Bill of 2024, a speedy and safe passage through this honorable House. Thank you, and may it please you, Madam President.
I recognize Honourable Member, Shadow Minister of Education.
Madam President, members, governments, colleagues, members of the intelligentsia, I bid you a pleasant good morning. Madam President, I rise today to give my contribution to the bill shortly entitled Diversity and Inclusion in Education Bill 2024. Madam President, I am certainly pleased to know that there is a bill relating to education because I want to see the development and advancement of the education system in our island. But Madam President, I am not too pleased with some of the sections on the bill. Madam President, 6 out of the 7 sections on the bill place onerous obligation on our staff and administrators in education who too, let's be honest, are very overwhelmed by tasks and responsibilities that include planning and delivering effective lesson plans, assessing students' progress, caring for students, and even tasks that go unnoticed. I do not see that the framers of this bill gave sufficient thoughts to the human resource that would be necessary to properly advance this agenda. When we look at Section 4A, it is asking us, and I quote, to incorporate diverse perspectives and histories into the curriculum to reflect the experiences of all students, end quote. Madam President, we are teaching a syllabus that is designed to saturate the brain of our students. Every year, teachers are rushing to complete with hardly enough time for concepts to sink in. And now we want to revise this curriculum to add more content. Madam President, there are many ways to skin a cat. This government wishes to promote diversity and inclusion. Then why not start in our communities and in our workplace? Implementing policies there would guard against discrimination and promote more unified communities. This is a more effective proposal because now diverse perspectives and histories would not be seen as something that students would have to learn, but they can see it as something that they can fully and freely accept within the community. Madam President, again, Section 3A on the bill states, education institutions shall develop and implement policies and programs to promote diversity and inclusion among students, faculty, and staff. Quite frankly, I must commend and applaud the government for wanting to include inclusion into our school. Because why not? Everybody deserves, both student and staff deserve to feel respected. But Madam President, to get it on par with diversity, that will bring about some challenges. Madam President, this definition of diversity is very wide. Diversity, as interpreted in the bill, and I quote, is the presence of individuals from a wide range of backgrounds, including but not limited to race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, religion, socio-economic status, and ability, end quote. It is clear that the agenda of the government is here, and it is unclear to me why the government feel it can take such a bold step which goes beyond our constitutional protection, and this is unconstitutional. Our constitutional, which sets out the value of our society, does not recognize sexual orientation as protected ground. So why is the government now trying to go beyond our constitutional provisions to the back door? No. Madam President, this House cannot proceed on the bill any further, as it is an affront to our constitutional democracy and the fundamental principle that the Constitution is a supreme law of the land. Madam President, as time goes on, the world will keep evolving and transforming. This transformation will bring numerous opportunities, surely leading to greater diversity within our country, which will find its way into our educational institution. As the Shadow Minister of Education, I would oppose forcing this change into our school curriculum, especially in our predominantly Christian society. The morals, the values, and the beliefs we hold as a community, especially when it is against what the Constitution recognizes, and especially when this government has failed to take any steps to talk to the people of the country about what it has come to here today. Madam President, in closing, I just want to make it clear that I would love to see the practice of having and ensuring that all individuals feel respected, valued, and supported within our institution. But things should be done properly. So I will leave us with few questions to ponder. Question 1, are we really ready to invite the value systems and belief of the world into our community? And number 2, are we really going down the road to force schools to teach moral issues? This is a slippery slope, and I would like to warn the government side to take it easy. May it please you, Madam President.
I recognize Honorable Member, Minister of Social Development.
Madam President, I rise to make a contribution to the bill shortly entitled the Nevis Diversity and Inclusion in Education Bill 2024. Madam President, colleagues, members of the opposition, audience in the gallery, and our digital listeners, a pleasant good morning. The Constitution of St. Christopher and Nevis, the supreme law of our land, states in Chapter 2, Section 3, that whereas every person in St. Christopher and Nevis is entitled to the fundamental rights and freedoms, that is to say, the right, whatever his or her race, place of origin, birth, political beliefs, color, creed, or sex, but subject to respect for the rights and freedoms of others. Madam President, even though laws have been put in place in accordance with the Constitution, we still face discrimination in our local society. We have become insensitive to the unique traits of individuals, such as their sexuality, etc. In 2022, in the case Jamal Jeffers versus the Crown, the High Court of St. Kitts and Nevis condemned Section 56 and 57 of the Small Charges Act as discriminatory colonial-era laws that targeted the LGBTQIA+ community. Madam President, this has brought more public awareness that this community has fundamental rights and should be treated equally under the law. However, discrimination is still rampant within our local society. Without the adjustment of legislation, discrimination will continue to spread throughout our society, and achieving diversity and inclusion will become even more difficult than it is presently. Madam President, I raise a simple question today. How many of us would stand to see our loved ones discriminated against because of their personal opinions, protected by the Constitution that governs our land, looked down upon and treated indifferently in society? The time has come for this act to be implemented and passed. Society is slowly coming to grips with the changing tide of inclusivity. Even the courts and Constitution support this innovation. It is important that consideration be given to the bill before this honorable House today to facilitate the movement towards the acceptance of citizens' fundamental rights and freedoms in our education system. Madam President, this is more than a bill. It is an investment in the protection of the future of our society, to ensure that generations of Nevisians can live in an inclusive and diverse society. No one should be afraid to express themselves for fear of their opinions being beaten down. And this starts with growing through the education system, developing their minds, accepting the opinions of others while embracing who they truly are. The Constitution of St. Christopher and Nevis, Chapter 2, Section 3, states that life, liberty, security of the person, equality before the law, and the protection of the law is an entitlement to all citizens. Madam President, we must, however, accept that no law or body of laws can govern any problem. We cannot legislate social behavior. Therefore, it is our responsibility to ensure that parents and teachers are part of the solution. Madam President, not only should they make their children aware of the law and of the dictates of the Constitution, but it behoves us to train our children at home and in the schools that we are all equal. Madam President, people learn from example, and that example has to be practiced in schools. It has to be evident that no favoritism is practiced and that all children are treated the same way. My ministry, therefore, takes the responsibility of working with our communities to ensure that this is done. We are putting together programs relating to adult education and seminars involving children and parents to ensure that we succeed in this endeavor. My ministry must and will work closely with the Ministry of Education to ensure that our programs dovetail with the programs of the Ministry of Education to secure a continuation in our...
Honorable Member, your time is up.
Madam President, may I please be allotted an extra 30 seconds to finish?
The question is that the honorable member be allotted extra time. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it.
My ministry, therefore, takes the responsibility of working with the Ministry of Education to ensure that our programs dovetail with the Ministry of Education's programs, to ensure a continuation of our efforts to secure an integrated society. I unreservedly give my full support to this bill, Madam President, and wish it a safe passage in this honorable House. If it pleases you, Madam President.
I recognize Honorable Member, Shadow Minister of Social Development.
Madam President, honorable members, colleagues, intelligent audience, good morning. Madam President, I rise to give my contribution to the bill shortly entitled Diversity and Inclusion in Education Bill 2024. Madam President, my issues with the bill are based on a sheer lack of practical and applicable implications protecting our education system from unwarranted constraints. Picture a skilled artisan at work, cautiously and carefully crafting a beautiful image. Each stroke represents an element of our society, traditions, values, and the way of life of our people. Over time, as the artist works, it becomes something amazing, a reflection of who we are as a nation, as a society, as a people, and as we are individually, woven together with care and precision. Now imagine someone coming along, eager to make changes. They make bold strokes and remove threads while adding new threads and ruin the work of the designer without understanding the intent of the designer. And what was once a harmonious blend of care and precision and heritage can quickly become a shell of its former self, losing what made it special in the first place. Madam President, this is what the diversity and inclusion in education bill threatens to do to our education system. The eagerness of the government to impose this bill threatens to put our society and children in jeopardy. Disrupting this very delicate system will negatively affect our students and communities as a whole. In the Constitution of St. Kitts and Nevis, in Section 11, it states the freedom of conscience, which implies that individuals, including students, should not be coerced into accepting a particular social or political belief, which should be interpreted as a non-ideological education. Which leads me to my first point, Madam President. This bill suggests a top-down approach, painting our local teachers and administrators as inferior to the government. Have we forgotten that the strength of our diversity comes from the diversity Have we forgotten that the strength in our education system lies in its diversity? Not the diversity that this bill speaks about, but the diversity of thoughts, values, ideas that each school provides to its individual students. According to edweek.org, quote, more than 2/3 of parents are worried about teachers indoctrinating their children and pushing an agenda on them, end quote. This survey was taken in December of 2022, a poll done by the American Federation of Teachers, which collected over 2,000 people, and 2/3 of them said they were worried about this issue. This indicates that it is not our duty to tell them what to believe, but to give them the skills and knowledge needed to traverse life. The thought that a one-size-fits-all mandate can replace the nuanced understanding of our local teachers and administrators is astonishing to me. Furthermore, this can cause division over unity. Though the intentions of this bill may be noble, it poses a risk of doing the polar opposite of what it claims. By focusing on what differentiates us, this may lead to a fragmented education system where students are more focused on what is different between all of us, than what unites us as Nevisians. Checking off diversity boxes seems to be the goal instead of fostering true and genuine relationships in our schools. There's a need for a more balanced approach. While the goal of this bill seems to be to focus on diversity, it appears that the true purpose of our education system has been forgotten. As a reminder, our education system is to prepare students for the future. This bill's heavy emphasis on diversity will cause a dilution of academic excellence in our students. Are our priorities skewed, or are we confused in some way? The point of educating is not to create these robots that fit into a template that we decide, but to give them the knowledge and skills needed to traverse life and to find their goals and their purpose. In conclusion, schools will be forced to spend precious time and resources fulfilling bureaucratic requirements instead of educating our children. While schools are already dying for resources and seeking help, these efforts undermine the autonomy of our education institution.
Honorable member, your time is up.
Madam President, may I be allotted an extra 1 minute to complete my speech?
The question is that the member be allotted extra time. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it.
The efforts undermine the autonomy of our schools and divide and shift the focus away from what truly matters in education. Note that in my illustration in the beginning, changes can be made to the portrait, but those changes must keep the portrait in balance, taking into consideration many other factors. Madam President, we can and must do better for our students and our country. The zeal and the fervency that is used to implicate this bill should be used to enforce other things that are needed in this country. May it please you, Madam President.
I recognize Honorable Member, Minister of Finance.
Madam President, my fellow honorable members, invited guests of the gallery, and virtual listeners, a pleasant morning. Madam President, today I stand before you in my capacity as Minister of Finance to make my contribution in support of the bill shortly entitled Nevis Diversity and Inclusion Bill in Education 2024. On this platform, I intend to share why this bill is important and how my ministry intends to aid with the implementation of the proposed bill. Madam President, one main mission of the Ministry of Finance is to secure a diversified and resilient economy, as well as developing and implementing sustainable programs aimed at giving our people a better and advanceable future. Madam President, the proposed bill aims to promote diversity, equity, and inclusion in our educational institutions. But Madam President, I must say that the proposed bill aligns with the ministry's goals, as well as broader government goals aimed at sustainable development and social stability. Madam President, I suspect the question is why diversity, equity, and inclusion are important in education. Well, Madam President, in my view, as well as our government's view, they are important for several reasons. Madam President, as society becomes more interconnected and diversified, it is important that our educational institutions reflect those values. By promoting diversity, equity, and inclusion, those impacted by the programs of the bill will be equipped with skills such as cultural competency, diversity awareness, as well as many other useful skills that can make a person better, but on a larger scale, foster economic development. And here's why. Madam President, in diverse and inclusive settings, many can learn to appreciate differences while finding common ground, and to engage different perspectives which foster open-mindedness. These skills not only aid in diversity awareness, but promises a well-rounded workforce equipped with competency essential to function in today's job market, where the ability to adapt to your environment and persons around you are essential for one's survival. Madam President, school is a pivotal opportunity to get the skills needed to join the workforce. Educational institutions help students, faculty, and staff to succeed in this economy and contribute to economic growth. By investing in the right curriculum and programs, it will prepare students for the outside world, which the proposed bill intends to accomplish. Madam President, an inclusive and diverse environment will eventually promote social cohesion. Social cohesion contributes to create a sense of belonging, which is a great factor of inclusion. Madam President, when someone feels valued and included in any environment, they will put in more effort to succeed. Madam President, cohesion is essential for social stability, while social stability is essential for economic growth. Madam President, I recently saw a quote in the internet that perfectly summed it up. It says, "A strong and stable society sustains a successful economy." Madam President, investments in education may drive long-term economic growth. When most of the population have access to quality education, regardless of personal background, it makes society more innovative and productive, which thus contributes to higher earning potential over their lifetimes. Through addressing different social factors in society, this bill can create an environment where everyone has the means to succeed. Madam President, I suspect a major concern of listeners, and especially opposition, is funding. Questions may arise such as, where will we find the money, or will there be an increase in taxation? Well, Madam President, I can assure you that there will not be an increase in taxation, and through conducting a thorough analysis of our current expenditures for the education sector, we'll identify areas where funds can be reallocated towards the costs associated with the bill without compromising essential services. Madam President, funding would also be done through partnerships with various credible public and/or private organizations whose goals align with our intentions to seek grants to achieve the objectives aforementioned. Madam President, I conclude by stating the point. Investing in diversity, equity, and inclusion in education should not only be seen as moral obligation, but as an economic imperative and investment in the future of our nation. Madam President, I thank you for your leave and wish to build a safe passage in this honorable House. May it please you, Madam President.
I recognize Honorable Member, Shadow Minister of Finance.
Madam President, fellow colleagues, government, online guests, and fellow viewers, good morning. Madam President, I rise today to give my contribution to the bill shortly entitled Diversity and Inclusion in Education Bill. Madam President, we have just suffered a significant loss of revenue due to the COVID-19 pandemic and are now attempting to recover from that. As a matter of fact, our current esteemed government continues to lament that there is no money in the treasury, which is in fact correct. According to the government's budget since 2021, we have been over the education spending expectations by over 2 times. Presently, the education system is currently lacking infrastructure and maintenance, lacking revenue, lacking course options and availability, lacking teachers, lacking classroom space, the Ministry of Education's budget, lacking. So the opposition is curious. How do you propose we pay for this fantastic bill that you're proposing to pass in this already struggling economy, dear government? Struggling to pay bills, struggling to buy food, struggling in everyday life, thanks to failure to prioritize funds. You want to dive headfirst into this fresh endeavor while struggling to maintain the existing industries and infrastructure. The new wing at the hospital, the infamous potholes in the roads, the ones citizens decided to use for agricultural purposes. It is a wonder you propose this bill requiring all these funds to make it work while they can't even be bothered to maintain our basic infrastructure. Madam President, may I even dare to go on to address the issue of our teaching faculty? Our dear, dedicated, wonderful teachers who daily try their best to teach our children well. Who will be designated to carry out these duties, Madam President? Our already underpaid and overworked teachers? How can we expect them to shoulder this new responsibility when they are already so very much challenged as it is, especially when they aren't receiving enough compensation for their efforts? A teacher's starting salary is around $2,000, and even working for over 15 years, it barely nears the $3,000 mark. The number of teachers leaving the profession is alarming, so much so that we cannot find enough to teach the already existing subjects as it is. To fill this new initiative, of course, you'd have to bring in new teachers, and with all the work that teachers do for students and parents, their pay should reflect their hard work. But we don't even have the funds to support that. Enough funds are already not allocated for resources pertaining to the education sector. When athletes or other school groups plan a trip, they have to raise their own funds. The government really helps. And why is that? Because the funds are not there. Section 4B states that educational institutions shall provide resources and support services to students from underrepresented or marginalized communities to ensure their academic successes. These services may include the provision of meals for students in need, bringing in counselors, learning support, and creating special spaces to facilitate learning. This, however, will mean larger facilities, more space that is required, more people, all of which require additional funds to maintain and operate effectively, funding which we do not have. If we were to implement these services, we would need additional money for larger facilities, more spaces to learn, places to prepare the food, people to cook the food, etc. The total cost of such an endeavor would not be feasible with such a limited budget. Schools already cannot get what they need in terms of infrastructure development and improvement. Take a look at all the faulty windows and doors, or even the state that the St. James Primary School is in at this point. The system is already strained, and you propose to incorporate these new, costly endeavors with disregard for other sectors of the schools? How do you plan to pull off these extravagant plans when the system is so deficient? As outlined before, Madam President, we have unfinished projects, unfinished roads, buildings, hospitals, all of which should pose a greater importance than the implementation of this bill. You cannot speak of this big diversity and inclusion ploy and fail to facilitate our current programs and development initiatives. The budget is already strained, especially regarding the education sector, which is already neglected. Diving into this, the government will have to find necessary funds to implement these projects. Probably an increase in utility costs, maybe even a step further to adding a cost to public schooling. Now tell me, are you willing to go now and pay for public schooling for your child, Madam President? The system is already strained, and instead of inclusion, you will end up excluding those.
Honorable Member, your time is up.
May I have an additional few seconds to finish?
The question is that the Honorable Member be allotted extra time. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it.
Instead of inclusion, you will end up excluding those who cannot bear the uprising funds that this bill would demand. This is the question that must be tabled for consideration. May it please you, Madam President.
I recognize Honorable Member, Minister of Youth.
Madam President, fellow colleagues, members opposite, and persons in the gallery, a pleasant good morning. Madam President, I rise to make my contributions to the bill shortly entitled Nevis Diversity and Inclusion in Education 2024. The Ministry of Youth will play a pivotal role in supporting the implementation of the Nevis Diversity and Inclusion in Education Bill 2024. Madam President, we recognize that creating an inclusive educational environment is essential for the holistic development of our youth and the advancement of the society. This bill is not just a legal framework, but a commitment to ensure that every student in Nevis has an equal opportunity to succeed, regardless of their background or circumstances. Madam President, our ministry will be proactive in assisting schools across Nevis to develop and enforce robust diversity policies. These policies will not only set standards, but will serve as a guiding light for our educational institutions. We understand that policies alone are not enough. Therefore, we will provide essential training for educators to equip them with the tools and knowledge they need to foster an inclusive environment. Madam President, this training will focus on promoting cultural competence, understanding and implement seed biases, and implementing inclusive teaching strategies that cater to the diverse needs of our student population. Furthermore, Madam President, our ministry's initiatives will include the creation of youth programs specifically designed to foster inclusive practices within schools and communities. These programs will encourage students from all walks of life to come together, learn from one another, and celebrate their differences. Madam President, by collaborating closely with educational institutions, we will ensure that these practices are effectively interrogated into the school curriculum and culture, making diversity and inclusion a natural part of the learning experience. Madam President, we will place a significant focus on supporting marginalized students who may face additional barriers to their education. Through targeted programs, mentorship, and counseling, we will provide these students with the support they need to thrive both academically and personally. Madam President, it is our firm belief that every student, regardless of their background, deserves access to the resources and opportunities that will help them reach their full potential. Madam President, community engagement will be a cornerstone of our approach. We will actively work to raise awarenesses about the importance of diversity and inclusion in education by building partnerships with organizations dedicated to educational equity. Through these partnerships, we will amplify our efforts to create a more inclusive educational system that reflects the rich diversity of Nevis. Madam President, our outreach will include public forums, workshops, and campaigns that engage parents, teachers, and community leaders in this critical conversation. Additionally, Madam President, we understand that the success of this bill depends on our ability to monitor and evaluate its impacts. The Ministry of Youth will continuously assist the effectiveness of our initiatives by gathering feedback from students, educators, and other stakeholders. Madam President, we are committed to ensuring to making necessary adjustments based on these feedbacks, to ensure that our efforts are meeting the needs of our students, especially those who are most vulnerable. In conclusion, Madam President, the Nevis Diversity and Inclusion in Education Bill 2024 is a landmark step towards creating an inclusive and equitable educational system in our beloved island. The Ministry of Youth is fully committed to ensuring the successful implementation of this bill. Madam President, by working together with schools, communities, and other stakeholders, we will build an educational system that not only respects, but celebrates diversity, ensure that every student has the opportunity to succeed. May it please you, Madam President.
I recognize Honorable Member, Shadow Minister of Youth.
Good morning, Madam President, colleagues, distinguished guests. As the Shadow Minister of Youth, I want to challenge the government with a simple question. Do we have resources? Do we? Introducing a bill to promote diversity, equity, and inclusion in educational institutions is always considered a revolutionary concept, a grand scheme, and a solid plan, until it reaches the execution phase. Why is that? Why have many before us tried and failed? Madam President, it is simple. You cannot build a house on a faulty foundation. Before we even begin to address the need for diversity, we need to address the basic resources needed for a successful educational system. The success of the educational institution is dependent on the effectiveness of the syllabus, materials, and human resources. There are opportunities to improve our curriculum to boost the exit pass rates, especially in the subject areas like mathematics, and to offer more courses that benefit our youths. Where is the focus on this? One of the main goals of the educational system should be to help young people apply and remember what they've learned. Madam President, as the Shadow Minister of Youth, I believe our focus must be on making sure the young people of this generation are truly prepared for their future. The resources in the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis are outdated and in need of serious improvement. In today's world, digital devices are crucial for youth success. Yet the government of St. Kitts and Nevis were unable to provide this quality learning experience to the students in the Federation. Despite this, we claim to be ready for diversity. Madam President, it's my duty to ensure that our focus remains on equipping all young people within the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis with the tools they need to be successful in their further life challenges. Our youths cannot function without dedicated teachers who are the backbone of this effort. Madam President, right now we are facing a national teacher shortage, especially in key subject areas like mathematics. The teachers we do already have are stretched thin, they are overworked and underpaid. Adding a diversity initiative on top of this means more responsibilities for our teachers in the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis. Adding a diversity initiative means this can lead to more cases of bullying, harassment, and discrimination, and teachers will be expected to manage these issues on top of their regular work lives. Beyond these challenges, we also need to consider the human resources required for the technical aspect of diversity. For example, if a new German student starts kindergarten, will we have translators in the classrooms or a teacher who can speak German? And what about students who are hearing impaired? How many teachers in the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis knows sign language? Madam President, the reality is we need more teachers and access to digital devices in the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis. Therefore, we need to seriously ask ourselves, are we truly ready for this new bill? I thank you.
I recognize Honorable Member, Minister of Gender Affairs.
Madam President, esteemed colleagues, viewers in the gallery, those listening and viewing virtually, a pleasant good morning. Madam President, I rise to make my contribution to the bill shortly entitled Nevis Diversity and Inclusion in Education Bill 2024. Madam President, my government believes that fostering a diverse and inclusive educational environment is not just a noble aspiration, but a fundamental necessity for the progress of our beautiful island. Madam President, as Minister of Gender Affairs, I support this bill. It is clear that this bill represents a crucial step towards creating a more equitable and inclusive educational system for all students without a fear of discrimination. Both women and men should have equal opportunities to excel in a brighter and richer diversity of ideas. We are all aware that education is the cornerstone of a booming society. It is through education that we instill values of tolerance, empathy, and respect for each other. By embracing diversity in our educational institution, we empower our youths to become global citizens, and this course will prepare them to be equipped to navigate an increasingly interconnected world. Madam President, this bill is not just about ensuring representation for marginalized groups. It is truly about creating a culture of acceptance and understanding, fostering a more inclusive environment where everyone is their true selves. It is also about celebrating the unique perspective experiences that each individual contributes. Madam President, it is of utmost importance that we understand that by promoting diversity and inclusion in education, we are sowing seeds for a society that is built on the principle of equality and justice. Madam President, inclusive educational environment is extremely important as it unlocks the full potential of every student. It is also important for us to be reminded that when students feel accepted and valued for who they truly are, they are more likely to engage actively in their learning and reaching their academic and personal goals. Madam President, once we provide a platform where all voices are heard and respected, we are fostering our upcoming generation of leaders who will drive positive changes in our communities. In conclusion, Madam President, I would like to congratulate my government for bringing this well-needed bill, and I therefore urge all members opposite to support this bill as we work together to build a future where every individual, regardless of their identity, has the opportunity to thrive and contribute meaningfully to the society. With these few words, Madam President, I would like to wish this bill a safe passage through this honorable House. May it please you, Madam President.
I recognize Honorable Member, Shadow Minister of Gender Affairs.
Madam President, esteemed colleagues, members of the government, viewers of the gallery, as well as those viewing virtually, good morning. Before I begin, Madam President, I would like to thank you for allowing me to voice the opinions and concerns of the people I represent regarding the Education and Inclusion Bill 2024. Madam President, although I am for the overall message that this bill represents, there's potential for some serious erroneous consequences to arise, especially in the field of gender affairs, if this bill is passed as is. Attempting to implement diversity is a huge step in the right direction of furthering the social development of St. Kitts and Nevis. But you have to think, has this kind of plan not been attempted before? And it isn't only because of the bill itself, but the execution. Ask yourself this: how will the students themselves react to this sudden implementation of diversity? Madam President, how many children are taught harmful gender-based stereotypes at home constantly? After all, when they aren't at school, the most appropriate assumption to make is that they're at home. No matter what the teachers and educatory staff might teach them, at the end of the day, to them, their parents know best. Madam President, what steps are the government willing to take to ensure that these children aren't being subjected to an opposing view of the very bill they're trying to create? You cannot force a parent's mind to change as they decide what's best for their children. Madam President, many teachers teach these seemingly traditional beliefs which are harmful to how they perceive others as they grow. But at the end of the day, Madam President, what can the government do to change these parents and their children's minds? To combat this issue, a thorough and robust campaign and consultation process is necessary. We have not heard of any such thing being done. Diversity and inclusion isn't supposed to focus on one point of view over the other, but make sure that everyone feels as if they are heard, that regardless of their social, economic, racial, and ethnic status, they are not discriminated against, and they are not excluded from anything because of the aspects which might make them a minority. Now, you may be questioning, how does any of this tie into the ministry over which I have oversight, gender affairs? Inclusion also has to do with gender equality, and it's a fairly common misconception that gender equality has to do with having a bias for one specific gender over the other, regardless of trying to implement a sense of equality. Both genders will feel as if one is being favored over the other, causing both to feel as if the bill is generally pointless. Although the government has the right idea, the execution may come out as wrong due to the stereotypes that women and men face. For example, that women cannot do a certain activity, so they give the girls extra help. This may put the boys at a disadvantage. So, my general point is that the efforts to enforce gender equality may inadvertently create biases between each other. Focusing on gender equality can lead to certain resources being distributed unfairly to one specific gender. If you attempt to focus on gender equality, this may hinder these students' individuality and their sense of self beyond gender. An example of a bias that may be perpetuated is that, hypothetically, there's a class of 16 girls and 16 boys. And for the past 2 years, the subject history has been giving the women specifically more trouble. To put them on the same level, they will give the women specifically extra classes. This can lead to stereotypes and uneasy feelings between both males and females. As I put, the 16 girls, 10 of them genuinely excel in history, and out of the 16 boys, 4 of them excel. Sure, it is acceptable to make assumptions based off of knowledge, but to automatically put all of these girls in extra classes under the guise of equality is unfair when their teacher and/or superiors can go based off of the observations from the students themselves as individual people and give them all the help they deserve, regardless of gender-based stereotypes. Therefore, I would like to conclude my argument by simply asking, what does the government plan to do to ensure gender equality, especially in our educational institutions? Because it is still important to note that children learn based off of what they see and what they hear. May it please you, Madam President.
I recognize Honorable Member, Minister of Social Empowerment.
Madam President, I rise to give my contribution to the bill shortly entitled Nevis Diversity and Inclusion in Education Bill 2024. Madam President, esteemed colleagues, members of the opposing teams, persons in the gallery, a pleasant good morning. Madam President, I stand before you today not just as the Minister of Social Empowerment, but as a firm believer in the transformative power of education. The bill we are debating, one that seeks to promote diversity, equality, and inclusion in our educational institutions, is a crucial step towards creating a more inclusive and equitable society for all our citizens. Madam President, I know education is the foundation upon which our nation is built. It is the great equalizer, the tool that empowers our young people to rise above challenges and achieve their dreams. However, for education to truly fulfill its promise, it must be accessible and equitable for every child, regardless of their background, ethnicity, gender, or economic status. This bill is not just about enacting policies, it is about ensuring that every student in Nevis feels valued, respected, and included in the learning process. It is about acknowledging that diversity is not a challenge to be managed, but a strength to be celebrated. Madam President, our nation is rich with cultural heritage, and it is this diversity that enriches our classroom and broadens the horizon of all our students. By promoting diversity, equality, and inclusion in our educational institution, we are laying the groundwork for a society that embraces difference and upholds the dignity of every individual. This bill mandates the creation of inclusive curricula that reflects the diverse histories and experience of our people. Moreover, this bill is not merely about compliance, it is about commitment. It is a commitment to foster an environment where students from all walks of life can live together, learn from one another, and grow into compassionate, informed, and responsible citizens. It is about equipping our future leaders with understanding and respect for diversity. and that is essential in our increasingly knitted world. Some may argue, Madam President, that such measures are unnecessary, that our schools are already places of equality. But I ask you to consider the voices of those who feel unheard, the students who face subtle biases or outright discrimination, and the talented individuals who do not have the same opportunity as their peers. This bill is for them, for the future of our nation, and for the principle of justice and the fairness that we hold dear. In passing this bill, Madam President, we send a powerful message that in Nevis, we do not just preach equality, we practice it. We do not just talk about inclusion, we live it. And we do not just dream of a better future, we build it. One policy, one school, and one student at a time. Let us come together to support this bill, to champion the cause of diversity, equality, and inclusion in our educational institutions, and to ensure that every student has the opportunity to succeed, no matter who they are or where they come from. With these few words, Madam President, I would like to wish this bill a safe passage through this honorable House. May it please you, Madam President.
I recognize Honorable Member, Premier and Minister of Education.
Madam President, to conclude this debate, the Nevis Diversity and Inclusion in Education Bill of 2024 is pro-Nevision. My government understands that diversity and inclusion are the foundation of a just and equitable society, a society that we are committed to building. Every student and teacher, faculty and staff deserve safety in the classroom, regardless of their race, ethnicity, gender, socioeconomic status, ability, or religion. They deserve to be safe and to access quality education. Madam President, the bill is a reflection of the reality of our society. We are all different. The very composition of this parliament and room is evident of that. Our stance is that every person has a rightful place in our society, and that society extends to educational institutions. As the government of the people, we have a responsibility, one which we take very seriously, to ensure that our policies reflect our diverse society. We believe that everyone deserves a fair opportunity to succeed. And so, let us pass this bill, a step in the right direction, one where everyone, every Nevisian, is included and protected. Thank you, and may it please you, Madam President.
The question is that the bill shortly entitled Nevis Diversity and Inclusion in Education Bill 2024 be read a second time. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
A bill to promote diversity, equity, and inclusion in educational institutions to foster a more inclusive and equitable learning environment for all students and for related or incidental matters.
This honorable House goes into committee.
Clauses 1 to 5.
The question is that clauses 1 to 5 form part of the bill. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
Enacting clause.
The question is that the enacting clause form part of the bill. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
The title.
The question is that the title form part of the bill. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it. This honorable House resumes its sitting. I recognize Honorable Member, Premier and Minister of Education.
Madam President, I rise to report to this honorable House that the bill shortly entitled Diversity and Inclusion in Education Bill has passed through committee stage without any amendments, and I seek your leave to have Rule 57 of the Standing Orders be waived or suspended so that the bill can be moved a third time and pass.
The question is that the Standing Order Section 57 be suspended to allow the bill shortly entitled Nevis Diversity and Inclusion in Education Bill be read a third time and pass. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
A bill to promote diversity, equity, and inclusion in educational institutions to foster a more inclusive and equitable learning environment for all students and for related or incidental matters.
The bill has been read a third time and passed into law.
Adjournment.
I recognize Honorable Member, Minister of Finance.
Madam President, I rise to move the motion to adjourn this Honorable House. Sine die.
I recognize Honorable Member, Minister of Gender Affairs.
Madam President, I rise to second that motion.
I recognize Honorable Member, Shadow Minister of Education.
President, I rise on a point of adjournment relating to the crime matters going on here in St. Kitts and Nevis. First of all, before I get to that, I would like to congratulate each one and every one of the youth parliamentarians who wrote exams this year and passed. Congratulations to everyone. And as it relates to those crime matters, I really want everyone to know, to the families, we send our deepest sympathy to you guys. And to those who are involved in any crime activities, we are asking, we're pleading that you guys stop and find some other activity, find a youth organization that you guys can join to prevent all of these. Youth parliaments accept any youth group will be recommended. I may it please you, Madam President.
I recognize Honorable Member, Premier and Minister of Education.
Madam President, I rise on the point of adjournment. I would like to join with the opposition leader and to take this moment to firstly congratulate my fellow youth parliamentarians for their CSEC and CAPE performances. It was truly commendable and is a testament of your hard work and dedication. Congratulations. Secondly, on a sadder note, I would like to address the current situation of violent crimes happening within our nation. This is an issue that impacts all of us in a very negative way. Each crime that is committed tears the very fabric of our communities as our safety, our trust, and our peace is obliterated. So to our youths, the power to reduce crime and the negative impacts of it, such as death and mourning, it lies within your hands. I encourage you to channel your energy into something such as developing your skills and education, as your potential is truly limitless. The choices that you make today not only impact yourself, but also your nation as a whole. And so I encourage you to make decisions that will bring about only positivity and growth. Thank you, and may it please you, Madam President.
The question is that this Honorable House be adjourned, sine die. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
to say thank you to the Almighty God who is our source of life. Of course, without him, this mock sitting would not have been possible. Permit me at this time to acknowledge the presence of Honorable Eric Evelyn, Deputy Premier of Nevis, Honorable Michelle Slack Clark, President of the Nevis Island Assembly, other members of the Cabinet in the Nevis Island Assembly, Honorable Latoya Jones, Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly, Honorable Dr. Daniel Hodge, Member of the Opposition in the Nevis Island Assembly, Mr. Farrell Smithen, former President of the Nevis Island Assembly, Mr. Joseph Parry, former Premier of Nevis. Our judges, Ms. Shamika Maloney, Attorney at Law and former Clerk of this Honorable House, Mr. Kyle Weeks, Certified IT Professional, and Mr. Mario Phillips, Gender Officer in the Department of Gender Affairs of Nevis, in the Nevis Island Administration. Specially invited guests, parents, guardians, friends, and well-wishers of our youth parliamentarians, good morning, and thank you for being here. It is with great honor that I say thank you to the members of our Nevis Island Assembly Youth Parliament. First, allow me to congratulate you on doing such a wonderful job. It was an excellent debate, and I want you to also congratulate yourself. Your hard work, dedication, and active participation in the events leading up to this mock sitting have clearly showed off here this morning. I'm quite certain that everyone will agree with me that they all did well, they were all outstanding, and they deserve standing ovation and a round of applause. Please just stand and give them. Yes, they have done extremely well, and I'm very proud of them, and I want to ask them to continue in the vein that they are going. Truly inspiring. Keep up the good works. Really appreciate every one of you. At this point, we now have the certificate of participation, and they will be distributed. So I will now ask Honorable Michelle Slack Clark to join me in this process. And this certificate is to demonstrate our gratitude to their hard work and dedication. We start with Ms. Talia Phillip. Ajalina Kalidas. Kostani Hanley. Dewis Stanley. Shanil Nesbitt. Jazara Ross. Asia Liebert. Nichelle Otley. Kenio Challenger. Okay. Micah Maynard. Steve Walters Jr. Kelina Laville. Brianna Farrell. And Junice Eaton. Okay, thank you. We'll now call Mr. Mario Philip to give an overview of this mock sit-in, and this will be followed by closing remarks by the Honorable Michelle Slack-Clark.
Good morning, everyone. Of course, I recognize Madam President in the gallery as well as, where is she? In the gallery as well. And ministers of government, especially the Honorable Deputy Premier, and all of our youth parliamentarians and supporting staff, and you in our audience in the gallery. Our opinion as the judges, we want to congratulate very heartily the youth parliamentarians, and I think they deserve another round of applause for their bravery in coming to speak before all of us today. And we also want to congratulate you for the time and effort that you would have put in, not only in researching what you would have presented today, but also in preparing how you would deliver. That is very important, and of course you were also graded on that in your how you present what you had to say. And so we could tell that generally time was taken to ensure that you presented good material and you presented it well. We also want to congratulate you because generally we found that you spoke with confidence. At the very beginning, I think there was a question put about extension of time, and we couldn't even hear the ayes, right? But as the session went on, we realized that you got more comfortable, and all speakers, seemed to be settled enough and spoke with great confidence. Some points for improvement. We realized very importantly that there seemed to be some confusion as it relates to equity and equality. The bill speaks very definitively, doesn't mention equality, actually. It always mentions equity. And so we found that some presenters spoke to equality rather than equity. And it was not listed it was not defined in the bill, equity, but it would have been on you as presenters to define it, to actually study it, and then come here and probably give a definition, propose one, if you found needed. But we found that many presenters spoke rather to equality rather than equity, right? And then if that's the premise of your argument, then it falls through, right? If you're not using the correct terms. So that is something you have to be careful with, the wording of the bill, what it says. You can't argue on what is not said. There was generally too much reading, and I felt that kind of made you a slave to your script, and you were not, in some instances, able to interact with the audience, be animated enough, right? I know that some of you were able to be animated, were able to capture our attention quite convincingly, but for others, there was a struggle there because you were bound to your script and what was written, right? Even in terms of the rebuttal, right? We expect that you would not be scripted, but you would actually speak to what would have been said in the room, and that also gives your opponents and the audience the impression that you were listening, right? That you didn't just come to speak, but you were listening to what was said in the deliberative chamber. For the opposition, it is generally, we believe, that you were strong on your appeal and brought strong counter arguments with supporting evidence. We saw you digging in there with references to the Constitution, the bill, and also things that are happening around us today. For the government, we felt that you would have researched and you knew the bill, right? Especially making reference to what was in the bill, and also, those of you, well, all of the government ministers making reference as well as to how the bill would have related to their particular portfolio. And so that was very good. Kudos to you on that. However, we found that you, in relying on that and also relying on your research, what you would have found relating the content of the bill, you neglected the appeal, right? Making the appeal through your, persuading the audience as to why we should take this position. Using your words, using your gestures, using intonation is very important to get people persuaded that you are persuaded as to what you're saying, first and foremost, and then that would also persuade them. It also makes you more memorable. So we do well to take this into consideration, but generally we are very happy with what you would have presented today, and we say a hearty congratulations again to you. Thank you so much.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Mario, for delivering the report from the judges on the performance of our youth parliamentarians. I am so very proud of them this morning because of the stages we went through to get to this point. They would have been involved in training on various matters to get them here. And I looked at them today, and I was proud of the different ways that they've developed in terms of their confidence, their ability to present, and for some of them, their ability to engage us. If I were to ask 14 of you who are sitting in the audience to come forward and guide us through the first to third reading of a bill in Parliament, the majority of you would want to remain where you are. And today, we have youth parliamentarians here. They know the lawmaking process, so they know how we get from a first reading to a third reading. They have received training in effective public speaking. They have received training in the rules of parliamentary debate. They have received training on social matters such as gender inclusivity and gender equality in Parliament and the role of the opposition in Parliament. So they have a very wide understanding of the workings of Parliament, and they were able to do all that before they came here today to debate this bill, and I am proud of them. There are some here who joined us just a few months ago, and there are some here who were part of our cohort from previous years. And in both cases, there are some who came in lacking in confidence and shy because they didn't want to present in public. And I've seen the advancement from that stage to now being able to speak boldly. And so I think they deserve the commendation that they've received this morning. So let's. Centuries ago, Shakespeare said that all the world's a stage and all the men and women are merely players. They have their exits and their entrances. And we have some of our members of Parliament who are here. They are on the stage now, but at some point they will have their exits. And so it's good that we have people here who know how the process works, so that when they make their exit, they can make their entrance. That continuity is important. This Youth Parliament program is very important because it's necessary for the next generation to know what is involved in lawmaking, what is involved in being a parliamentarian, and I strongly believe it's very important for young people to know how to effectively communicate in a public space. And so I want to encourage all of you, I want to encourage viewers and listeners to support the Youth Parliament program because it is of vital importance in our community. Now, I don't plan to engage you for too long. That is essentially what I wanted to communicate, as well as to express gratitude to everyone who contributed to today's sitting. The sitting was largely organized by our clerk, Ms. Myra Williams, and our deputy clerk, or junior clerk, sorry, in the legislature office, Ms. Daquila Maynard, who is sitting at the back. They have done a lot, and so I want to express my gratitude to them for all that they have done. There are also a few other persons who we would wish to mention and extend our gratitude to. Of course, to our assessors who, when we spoke to them, we got a yes instantly without the need to beg or plead, and so we are grateful to them for being willing to lend us their time to contribute to this very important exercise. To the various media houses who advertised and announced the sitting, and to NNC Nevis Television for streaming the sitting this morning so that the members of the public who couldn't fit in our small space, and even persons outside of the jurisdiction, could have been able to witness what happened here today. So thank you very much. We also want to say thank you to Mr. John Prentice, who usually assists us with transportation of our youth parliamentarians for our various events and for our rehearsal sessions. Thanks to Ms. Leander Cornelius, Ms. Sherilyn Liebert, and Mr. Teshran Maynard for logistical support. The Superintendent of Police, Mr. Alonzo Kati, for the assistance provided to us for today's sitting. And of course, to the Nevis Island Administration, who usually lends their support to our Youth Parliament activities and who has graciously accepted again to provide lunch for our youth parliamentarians for today. So I want to express gratitude to all these people. I am very proud and I'm grateful to you all for being here, and I am happy, pleased with our youth parliamentarians who have done exceptionally well today and who clearly remind us that there is hope for a bright future for all of us. So thank you to the youth parliamentarians, and thank you to all of you for coming today. You're free to leave.